Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Island Transit Board of Directors regular monthly business meeting for July 12th, 2024. I call the business meeting to order. Roll call in the room.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here. Lance?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Craig Sear. On the video conferencing, we have Melanie. Are you here?
I'm here.
And Jenny? Okay.
Jenny's there.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah, we didn't hear you. Commissioner Sinclair.
sorry.
I'm here.
Very good. So we do have a quorum. Now we move to the approval of the consent agenda. I have the minute from the last regular business meeting and the June 2024.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bacon seconds. Any discussion about the consent agenda? Pull anything off? See that, so all in favor, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. All opposed, abstentions, motion passes. So this is the time set aside for members of the public to speak to the board about subjects of concern or interest, or items not already set aside for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comment may be ended or modified if the comments become disruptive or are not germane to the business at hand. Input requiring lengthier comment is best submitted in writing. Do we have any people in the room with public comments? I don't see any. Online, anyone?
Does not look like it, and we did not receive any public comments from it.
Okay, last call. Does anybody want to give more public comment? Seeing none, we are closing our public input section, and now we are moving on to the agenda. You know what? I skipped the approval of the agenda, and I know that Commissioner St. Clair, you'd like to add an item to the agenda.
Yes, we can add it at the end. It is just simply to have a brief conversation about the scope of interim leadership and an update on what the board's understanding of that is.
Okay, we will place that on the agenda as item number 8, business item. Is that okay? All right. Very good.
I make a motion to approve the modified agenda.
Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Councilmember Bright. Any other modifications? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the modified agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, passes. All right, we have an agenda. Now we'll move on to our first item of business, and that is a report on Monday's service. And Director Bradley, take it away.
Good morning. I am filling in for Operations Manager Sean Harris on this item, who was not available to be here today. So Sunday service has been performing well overall on for us. The last quarter, we have been looking at our average by quarter as we go through, because there can be variations month by month based on weather and those kind of things, because in a typical month, you may only have 4 or 5 Sundays. So one Sunday with bad weather can really throw your numbers off. So we look at it on a quarterly basis instead of by a monthly basis. This past quarter has been 37% higher than the average of the previous 3 quarters since Sunday service was initiated last year. There's been nice growth along the way, but that growth, I can tell you, has mostly been on Whitby. Our on-demand usage overall on Sundays has been very low. That has had a minimal impact on our services, because on-demand service is commingled with our paratransit service. So those buses and drivers do double duty. They're handling our paratransit clients on the weekends, and if they get an on-demand call, then they go out and take care of that. So we have been able to handle our on-demand requirements or needs with our existing paratransit drivers. But that is something that has been low on the weekends for on-demand service. And this review also did show that Camano Island has low usage overall. Whitby has pretty good Sunday service and pretty good utilization of the Sunday service. We do need to study some alternative service scenarios for Camano. Paratransit and on-demand service on Camano specifically has been very low. It is not uncommon for Camano to have a single-digit ridership for the month on paratransit on Sundays, as well as for on-demand service. Now, where that can come in is we have 2 8-hour shifts going on Camano to cover paratransit and on-demand. Between the two, for instance, in June, we had 22 rides on paratransit and on-demand combined. We had 4 Sundays of 16 hours of manpower that we paid for on each of those Sundays. So we provided 22 rides for 64 hours man hours. So that's something that in Camano, we do need to look at. We need to study and find out maybe what an alternative service scenario could be for us, because we're providing about a third of a ride per man hour that we're putting into that service. So that is low utilization. That is something that we do need to look at. I have also checked with the operations staff this morning. Since we have canceled made the cancellations on July 7th of the Central Parks route, we have not had to cancel any core services this week. We are still regularly working folks on double shifts to make sure that we cover everything. So there is still a need for drivers to come in, but we have been covering that savings that we had from our service cuts that went into effect on July 7th has paid off, and we have not been canceling service. So operations staff feels pretty good that that's probably going to be the norm from here on out, that we should not be canceling service, but we are still short on drivers. We are routinely working drivers well into overtime. So there is still a need to bring drivers on board. We do have we have 1 driver that will exit training tomorrow. We have 2 more drivers that are in the training pipeline. This is for Whitby. And yesterday there were driver interviews. We anticipate that from those interviews, we will have 5 driver trainees starting August 5th for Whitby, and 1 driver trainee starting on August 5th for Camano Island. Camano is fairly well staffed, so they only needed 1, but the 5 drivers that we could bring in for Whitby are definitely needed. So that's where we are at with Sunday service, as well as the recent service changes and our cancellations.
Any questions?
I know you're the fill-in presenter, but there wasn't one number in that entire presentation other than 34% increase. So I don't know if we went from 0 people to 34. I don't know. I mean, respectfully, that didn't tell me anything.
Our Sunday ridership in the last quarter was around 5,400 combined between Whitby and Camano.
And how many Sundays did that represent?
That was our Sunday service.
How many actual?
Oh.
So you said it was a quarter. So how many Sundays within that quarter?
I believe it was 13 or 14 Sundays.
Okay. And then I'm assuming those are trips each way. So that's not 54 individual riders. It'd be whatever the half of that is.
It would be individual rides, because it's too hard for us to track round trips. So we categorize folks by what we call as unlinked trips. So that's 5,400 times somebody walked on a bus.
Yeah, got it.
And that is all the modes. That's paratransit as well as fixed route.
And are you able to go back and do an analysis of how much of that is paratransit and on-demand, and how much of that is just general ridership? Are we able to differentiate that?
We can do that, and we could send that out next week, to the board via email.
And then I had one more question on something I don't understand, and I'm gonna ask it as soon as you give me those numbers, so I better understand it now. Could you do paratransit on demand without general ridership, or you have to offer general ridership in order to do paratransit and on demand on those days? So I know paratransit is associated with distance from a primary route, but I didn't know if it was, you could only offer it on the days that you offer general service. I don't know that.
You can offer paratransit without fixed route, but
Okay.
you cannot offer fixed route without paratransit.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, can you have questions?
Yes, it looks like Commissioner St. Clair.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We launched the Sunday service and some of this paratransit prior to Snow Goose Transit launching their service on Camino. I think it would be worthwhile, given the low ridership, to look at what Snow Goose is covering. And if this is a duplicative service over here to what Snow Goose does, I think we should have a conversation about that.
Yes, ma'am. I can reach out to, the Snow Track organization, and find out, get some data from them and provide that to Sean.
Yeah, I think that might help us decide if we're overlapping each other's service territories and timing and all of that, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's find out what they're doing, because we may have good justification to pull back if they can pick up the ridership.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Bright.
Just a quick question. What is the current marketing efforts around the Sunday service for consumer awareness that this is available?
We do, a number of outreach events. For instance, this last, month, we were at 13 events, some of which we hosted, such as our public meetings around the service changes. Other events are, like the Pride, Day, where Celine was at a booth at an event. So that's what we have right now. It is, there is probably, or could be, more of an effort to promote our services overall, especially on Camino. I will be there August 6th on the National Night Out. I'll be at the Madrona Fire Station that evening. There's a couple of other times where I know Tony from my team is going to be over there for events in August and late July.
Is there anything, possible static on social, or, because I know, there's a lot of, when you're doing recruiting, there's a lot of things on social, but not necessarily around, and route closures, but not necessarily around route availability. Sunday's kind of unique and special, so that's why I just wondered.
Yeah, and we do need to, there's certainly room for more effort there. One of the things that Commissioner Bacon brought up in a previous meeting was she had a conversation with a pastor who asked us to come reach out to that pastor's congregation. So those are the kind of efforts that we are talking about undertaking, and trying to get maybe some more weekend promotional efforts in person to try to build up our ridership a little bit, get the awareness out there of what is available. And Celine, did you have an additional item?
We have been reaching out to individual organizations as well, like Whitby Playhouse, anyone who has Sunday related services, and we've been giving them materials individually and explaining it to them.
Okay, thank you for that follow-up.
Any other questions on this item? Yes.
So if I did my math-ish, if we had 5,400 riders, I just divided that in half. Some would be one-way riders, some would be multiple trips riders, so I just put it in half. So just so you know where my assumption went. Then I used the low number of Sundays, the 13 Sundays. So that gave us 207 riders per day. And then I divided that by an 8-hour day. Does that seem about right? an 8-hour workday?
I believe we are closer to a 14-hour day.
Oh, well, that messes up my math. So at 8, okay, so at 8 hours. Hang on.
Because we do run 2 shifts. We run an A shift and a B shift on the weekends. That is something that Sean and I have talked about is, you know, one of the ways we can try to make our weekend service a little more efficient. Would be operating a 10-hour day. So Skagit Transit, for instance, operates from 8 to 6, and they do that with a single shift of drivers.
Okay,
And that could save us some manpower time. But one of the hurdles with that is, right now, our collective bargaining agreement has a limit for us scheduling fixed route service beyond 9 hours in a single day.
Right.
We're capped at 9 hours. That makes it hard for us to go down to a single shift. And
so,
that's, Mr. Norton was not a complaint per se, that's just a recognition of the factors that.
Yeah.
Right.
so if I did the 10 hours per day, 14 hours per day is what you just told me.
I believe it is 14-hour span of service.
So then we end up with roughly 15 riders per hour. How does a 15 rider per hour compare to a normal weekday? Is that like about where we're at normally, or how proportionally off is that from our normal rider day?
So it's looking here, I'm trying to interpret a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I do apologize. I found out yet last night that I
Yeah.
was filling in today,
So
so.
I'm gonna suggest that, to get accurate numbers, why don't we, work with Sean and send it out. I'm actually interested myself.
Okay,
Yeah, it probably is better to do that and send an email out to the board to follow up.
There's monthly ridership on the fixed deviated. That's just for May. There's 33,000 cents.
I can tell you,
each day.
That's for the month, the entire month of May.
Okay.
in general, our running tracking sheet
Thank you.
shows that, our total fixed route ridership accounts for about 86% of our overall ridership. 13% of our overall ridership is paratransit, and right around 1% is on demand. Now, that's a broad number, at the edge of our tracking sheet, but that's where we're at. And we'll get you more information and a detailed breakdown. Like I said, next week, we'll email that out to the board.
I mean, I think it'd be good to have a conversation when we have comparative data points, because it was a good presentation, and I understand that it's going well. I mean, that's how it started. It's going well, but that doesn't give me any context, any data points to compare. I don't know if I'm comparing against expectations or other days of the week.
Excellent question, Steph.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna suggest we move on to the next item, and Mr. Windler, you're up for the September service change.
Correct. And June 7th, we introduced, for consideration, an overview of our September service change. I'm going to review the PowerPoint that we did on June 7th briefly, because I know we have a long agenda today. So first thing is, with our fixed route service, we are trying to reduce the amount of staffing that is needed so that we can keep service cancellations at bay. Right now, we have some irregular schedules that are confusing some of our clients. Some of our routes, they start at on the hour in the morning, and then they'll have a gap for an hour and a half, and then they start at maybe 20 after or 45 after the hour. And then there's another gap, and then their times change. And that can be very confusing for customers. Often in the transit world, people understand, I go to the bus stop at 7 after the hour to catch my bus. And when that time hops around, it can be difficult for senior citizens and the developmentally delayed to utilize our services as well as anybody else. We also need to come up with a plan for ferry service reliability. So we've adjusted our weekdays to have some more consistent schedules, reduces our drivers, and will meet a majority of the ferries. And I do apologize, it's actually 22 out of 28 ferries is what we will meet. Next slide, please. The routes that are affected are the 1, the 6, the 58, and the 60. So what we mean by a consistent schedule here is on the left, that is what the Route One departures from Harbor Station look like now. And then on the right is what they will look like after the service change goes into effect. And so it becomes a much more consistent schedule on the right-hand side. There's no gaps, there's no jumping around. It becomes very consistent. The only abnormality is for the 3:30 shift, and that is to allow for peak service to the Clinton Ferry. So we start that at Harbor Station and go down from there. So that's an example of what we mean by a consistent schedule. This new schedule will require fewer drivers. Right now, we're looking at a reduction of 2 drivers. This does not mean that there will be layoffs. We need more drivers than we have. That's why we're making these changes. So anybody that's listening, I do want folks to understand that we're not talking about layoffs here. We're talking about efficient scheduling. We need to grow our ranks of drivers, not reduce them. Next slide, please. So these are the 6 ferries that will not have bus service. The rest of the ferries that come in will have a bus that is scheduled to meet them as long as the ferry is on time. So the goal is, again, consistent service, being there every half hour to meet the ferry service. I can tell you that we are looking to make a couple of tweaks with the July 7th service change that went in and the cuts. Our staff has been down there in the evenings to meet with the commuters as they get off with the ferry, because the Clinton commuter bus went away. We have gotten some negative feedback, from those commuters. They really want to have more service and reliable service. And we've also run into the fact that 2 of the 3 days that we were there, the ferry was well off schedule. So that meant that the Clinton commuters, even though we were scheduled to meet the ferries when the ferries come in, the ferries were running 20 minutes late. And so then that meant that the riders maybe had anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes that they would have to sit and wait on the bus departure. So we're trying to look at this. We're trying to make some adjustments, especially with our September service, to make sure that we cover that and correct that.
So I want to interject here. The staff that has been at the Clinton Ferry dock has really taken the brunt from affected riders who counted on the Clinton service. It's really important to understand that when we say we're doing our best to cover this with Route 1 and Route 60 looping up there on their way up the islands, the Clinton commuter was always there at the dock when the ferry arrived. So that was one of the real services we provide. And this is one of the real impacts of not having this service and not having enough drivers. It's my hope that when we have more drivers, it's an aspirational goal that we would fix this service, because it is important. What we now have is people walking from the ferry dock up to the Clinton Transit
Park and ride.
And on very hot days, that's challenging for people who can't, maybe need to get to a baseball game or an event and cannot wait, say 20, 25 minutes for the next bus. So anyway, I do also want to add that when the ferry is 20 minutes late, it's a huge stress on Island Transit. When we cannot wait 20 minutes for a ferry to arrive, like number one, cannot do that. So anyway, that's a real impact decision made.
So we are looking at some tweaks to this, and one of the tweaks, depending on exactly how we schedule it, will cover it'll cover probably the 2 o'clock, and it may also cover the 3 o'clock ferry. So we may actually get more coverage with the tweaks we're looking at. We're trying to balance manpower with service, because the goal of this is we don't want to offer a service that doesn't have the reliability behind it. If we say we're going to do it, we need to be able to do it day in and day out. and that's the goal. Our public outreach, we had 3 public meetings. In addition to those public meetings, we have been out there these last 3 days, Celine, myself, and Tony, as well as some of our operations staff to meet the commuters as they come off. Our overall feedback is the service changes look good. They do wish the Route 6 went to the Coopville Ferry. That was some of the comments that we got, which was why on July 7th, the Route 6 did return to the Coopville Ferry. So we did make that change. As I said this week, we did get a lot of negative feedback. We are incorporating that. We're going to try to adjust our Clinton Ferry service a little bit in response to that. We did receive some comments that were not directly about the service change, about needing more seating, needing more shelters. We also have received comments that wait times for the on-demand service are too long. And we got a lot of compliments about the Haven service. So with that, I know we have a crowded agenda today, but I yield to your questions.
So you're gonna bring back a proposal that we're gonna vote on, right, in the future for this September service change?
No, sir.
No.
We're asking for permission today to conduct a service change. There should be a memo,
Yes.
business item number 2. That says, I move to approve the implementation of the September 29th, 2024 service change as presented at the June 7th and July 12th board meetings.
Janet, have.
Questions?
The commissioner has a question.
Commissioner St. Clair.
It's not really questions. Well, one is a question. 3 comments. The ferry disruptions seem to be very related to the challenges we're having here. Can we reach out to Tony Vizina and talk about that and how we can improve communication and what their plans are to create more reliable, predictable services? So that's a suggestion. On the on-demand wait times, I'm curious about that, and I can take it offline because I know we have a very crowded day, because it's not meant to be a taxi service. And so I want to make sure we're setting expectations appropriately. On demand may involve wait times because we pick up more than one passenger. So I'm curious, and you can follow up with me separately about that. And on the mobility question and the public input, the governor's Commission on Disabilities annually has funding available for grants to organizations. We may want to take a look at that and see if we can put more seats in with that funding. It's often undersubscribed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Donovan.
Does the van pool bus van require a CDL?
No, ma'am. Our rideshare vans do not require CDL. They do require that their license be checked, and they have to take an online training course to assure that they are good drivers and safe drivers.
So I'm a brainstormer. I can't help it. So I was wondering for those Clinton routes, if we could hire somebody who doesn't have a CDL to just drive a van pool van, because we canceled it because we assumed it was lower ridership, right? And if that was just their job, was to make that loop, but they don't have to be a fully qualified bus driver, would that be an easier type of person to recruit and not affect staffing because they couldn't do anything else? They'd just be driving a van pool. You don't have to have an answer. You just have to say, that's a good idea. I'll think about it then.
Yeah, and that's one we would have to run by our insurer.
Okay. I wasn't saying the people themselves. I was saying hire an employee that didn't require that CDL skill level. Because to
Okay.
me, that seems a harder thing to get than just a driver's license.
We would
Yeah,
also need to review it through the collective bargaining agreement as well.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. See, this is
Um,
what's wrong with most of my ideas.
Well, but you're actually tapping into something that is in the transit industry. A number of agencies on the other side of the water are talking about for their on-demand services, hiring drivers as employees who are not CDL qualified, and then kind of using that as a recruiting tool to then, find out who's a good employee and then recruiting them in and sending them through their CDL training. So that actually is a train of thought that is going through our industry.
All right, I'm gonna give myself a C plus.
I can give you a B plus.
Really? All right,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna put
Okay, so I think we need a motion. Does anybody want to make a motion? Service change.
Can you explain to me real simple again what it is? I'm sorry for not getting it. I read the memo, but I'm not.
That's okay. So what we're doing is we are, modifying our weekday service on the routes 1, 6, 58, and 60 to have more consistent service throughout the day, and throughout the island, as well as improving our coverage at the Clinton Ferry, terminal. While we're trying to be a little more efficient with our staff, we actually can offer more consistent, reliable service, but have less staff while we do that.
And what gets cut to do that?
One of the items was the Clinton commuter route. That was the biggest cut. And then we also trimmed some, there was some last trips in the evening, I believe, that we also trimmed as well.
I guess for me, my only concern is the 8 to 9 o'clock. Or the Clinton ferry. We'll go 6 to 7, if I'm reading the schedule, it's like we're there at 6, we're there at 7. But then not there at 8, not there at 9. There for 10, but not 11 or 12, is that correct?
Partially. So the ferry arrives every 30 minutes, so we have an arrival. You know, so we may not be there at 7, but we are there at 7:30, then if we're not there at 8, then we are there at 8:30. So there's 2 arrivals an hour for the ferry, so that one slide that we have, we
Yeah.
are there for some of the morning service.
But the slide said the ones that we won't be there is 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock,
Correct.
right? And so those are, I mean, I don't commute, so I'm not sure, but it seems like 8 o'clock would be a kind of a peak commuting time still. Is that not, or?
I will defer to
Yeah,
Craig on that as what the.
I don't know, I actually don't know about Clinton arrivals and northbound service. I do watch the 6 AM. The people arriving for the 6 AM, there's a fair number that come up then. And we should probably, if Sean were here, he could probably immediately answer that with numbers. It'd be interesting to look at that. I would certainly think aspirationally, we want to add that back in when we have more drivers.
Yes, and one of the things that the service change will provide is it's gonna be easier to add service, add frequency as we go forward.
Why is that?
Because the way our schedule is set up, now buses can slide in easily during the day. So like, we have departures on the 1 from Harbor Station at the top of the hour and from the Clinton Ferry dock at the bottom of the hour on a regular basis. So when we go to increase frequency, we know exactly where to put the bus in to increase the frequency throughout the day. Instead of having the bus jumping around and having those different departure times, now it's easy to slide a bus in.
When do you have to make this decision by in order to make it effective for September?
Celine, is in charge of our rider guide. When do we need to go to print on the rider guide?
In 2 weeks.
For the September 29th service change?
Oh, well, is it effective September 1st or September 29th?
September 29th.
Okay, then I have 4 weeks.
So.
I
4
have,
weeks.
I have a month before it absolutely is drop dead.
A little inside transit talk. It's actually the rider guide that drives our timetable. As strange as that may sound, because we have to make sure that we have rider guides 2 weeks in advance of our service change for distribution to the public. So when we get rider guides in, it actually determines like our flexibility. So we would have time. The August second board meeting is in 3 weeks, so we could reconvene and discuss this if there's added items that the board would like to see included.
The drop dead means that it has to be approved, completely done and everything in there in 4 weeks to be at the printers.
Okay.
So I would need that information at least in the next 2 weeks, because it's gonna take us about 2 weeks for us to update the service guide, because it takes time for us to update the service guide. So 2 weeks is really what I need.
Alright.
You want me to push the time? I can.
Yes.
I will push the time.
I don't know that was just a me question. No, everybody else can be ready to go.
Jenny.
Oh, so I'm sorry, who has a question?
Jenny.
Councilmember Wright, yes.
Just a comment. I mean, I think that, given Eric and just the questions that are on the table, especially relative to volumes during peak time for those two timelines, I think it will be helpful to kind of know what we're sacrificing by eliminating those. Is that too much to ask to push this to August to get some of the data around that? And during like peak usage time for those two, that cancellation times, as opposed to like, I know we've canceled them a lot recently. So when usage was at its highest.
All right, so we will gather some information around peak usage, and that will be an additional item I will send out next week for the board's consideration. Is that an acceptable outcome?
I'll make it 4 weeks. I'll make it.
So we have 4 weeks, so we could, I'll send information out on peak usage, and additional impacts, from changes to the Clinton Ferry Terminal, and then we will finalize, we can table this today.
Yeah.
And we can finalize it at the August 2nd board meeting.
Okay, sounds good. So, Maggie's not here, so you make a note and let her know that this will be on the next board meeting, right?
It has
Yes,
to
sir.
be.
Okay. Great questions. Now, we move on to, the next item, which Mr. Whitmer will be presenting on. This is the update on the TDP. This is the, required, narrative that lays out our 6-year plan. This has to be passed in August. We have a special board meeting to do that. I remind you, the last Friday, that's the 30th. So give us a quick summary.
Yes, we have been drafting the 6-year transit development plan. And we do have a transition underway, so our timetable is off from how we would normally process a transit development plan. We will be going out to internal review today, so the managers will all get to look at it. I will get their feedback. And the goal is to distribute the narrative to the board next week for your review, comments, questions in advance of the August meeting, so you get a chance to review it. We will have, what you will get next week will not have the financials in it. Those are still being worked on, but they will be ready in time for the August 2nd board meeting. So when we present a draft, that will be included. We are required by state law to have a public comment period, which is why we have 2 meetings in August. So the August 2nd, we will open a public comment period, and then we will close it with the August 30th special meeting. And then it is required by state law to be submitted by September 1st. So that is our timeline, and you will be seeing it shortly.
Thank you.
Any questions by the board?
I would just encourage the board, when the TDP arrives in your inbox, it's actually a very interesting policy document. And I hope you'll allocate some time to read it. And you'll have less to read this year, I think, but it's still a 90-page document. So it's a significant piece of work by planning staff. Thank you. All right, now we move on to business item number 8 on the Gallagher wage study and analysis. Commissioner Hagan will take us through this. You are muted.
You're on mute, Melanie.
Melanie Ray. Okay, there I am. So Celine, if you could open up the presentation, thank you so much. That's not it. There we go. Thank you so much. And hey, Jenny. So the reason I wanted to go through this with you is because we've been getting a public records requests of people wanting to know what was the salary study, what was, I mean, the ranges, all the, wanting to know all this information. And before we release all that, I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see what it was. And I've gone and collated all these different spreadsheets and different stuff to make it be information I think is fairly easily understandable, but still provides all the information folks are looking for. So what we're going to go through is a study of the adoption, Island Transit's adoption of the 2023 salary study, but it is not an analysis of any individual's pay. We are talking about individuals' pay, but that is not part of this that I'm talking about here today. So next slide, please, Jeannie. So we hired Gallagher to do two things for us. And the first thing that they did was they did a market study in which they looked at 33 different jobs. And then secondly, they worked with human resources to design a salary structure. They designed a salary structure that they presented first to human resources and to, I presume, the executive director in October. And then there were changes made and a new salary structure was presented at the end of November. What the board approved in December was not a salary structure. What the board approved was the impact of salary changes on a macro scale. But next slide. So the market study that Gallagher used, they looked at the market information for 33 jobs, and these are the organizations that they pulled that data from, that they communicated with. And then they applied geographic differentials because perhaps, for example, Oak Harbor School District, the city of Oak Harbor may be more expensive than where Island Transit is perhaps, or Yakima may be less expensive. So they applied some geographic differentials, and this is standard methodology in compensation. Everything that Gallagher did in creating their market study was in accordance with standard market compensation practices, as I mentioned in the December board meeting. Next slide. This is important. Once they determined their market data, which is the first thing that they had completed for Island Transit, that information never changed. And market price is the average of what a job is paid in these different agencies. The average, this is the value of those jobs. And what's important when we look at ranges in a minute is you set the midpoint of the range to the average of the market price, more or less. So you'll see in a moment average market price, and you'll see a midpoint for the pay range, and those should be pretty close to each other. Generally, that's how you try to set up structures. This particular slide is one of those pieces of information that citizens and employees have been asking for. So next slide. So what we did see change, as I said, the market's data never changed, but what we did see change from October to what was adopted and rolled out in December was the actual salary structure that they used. So the proposed pay structure in October looked like that top picture. And you'll see the range spread from the minimum to the maximum is 25% for every pay grade. It has 11 pay grades, 25% range spread for all of them. And we're going to talk about range spread at the end. Right now, we're going to focus about the salary structure and the jobs that were put in the salary structure. So after a lot of conversation between Gallagher and the organization, the pay structure that was adopted is the one that you see in the bottom right, which also includes the 2024 COLA. That was I think a 3.25% COLA. And you'll see that the range spread in this adopted structure transitions from a 25% range spread at the lower pay grades to a 50% range spread at the top. Okay, next slide, Jeannie. So I have 3 pages here, and the reason I have 3 pages is because this is the other piece of information that citizens and employees are looking for, and that is where their jobs were placed in the pay grades. So where jobs are placed in the structure. So the first pay salary structure that I just showed you is for the pay grade for October. When it changed, as that was a draft. That was a draft. The final one that ended up being adopted is pretty consistent with the pay, with where we are at the end of November. And you have different grades. So there's not really much to talk about that here. You can look at it and kind of see. So you can go through the next 2 slides, Jeannie. They're pretty much the same. They just have different jobs that are listed. Yeah, it's pretty much the same pieces of information, just with different jobs. And then you can go to the next thing. So I have some observations I wanted to point out as a result of all this. So in the presentation that Gallagher gave to the board of directors in December last year, they made 2, I think, were pretty telling statements. First, they said that Island Transit's average actual salaries were competitive at all levels. And also, and I see I typed are competitive twice, I apologize. And also that overall Island Transit's average salary ranges were competitive at the minimum. They slightly lagged the market at the midpoint and the maximum. So there was no demand for a change to the salary structure other than a possible increase to the maximum of the pay ranges. And generally, we were paying people properly and appropriately in the marketplace before the salary structure was adopted. And looking at the different jobs, I make no judgment whatsoever regarding why some jobs saw an increase or a decrease to the assigned pay grade from the October analysis through the one that was done at the end of November. Because job descriptions differ at every organization, and some jobs at Island Transit may have been determined to have either a greater or a lesser scope than comparable jobs in other organizations. That happens. Next slide, Jeannie. And this is where we're getting into the things that have been a driver for me. Although individual pay is not examined here in what I'm talking about today, one thing does stand out. The salary ranges that were adopted at Island Transit all include time in the job at Island Transit as a determination of where an incumbent was placed into a grade. Interestingly, in the adopted structure, broadbands were also utilized. So as I said earlier, the change in the range spread from a 25% recommended for all ranges in that October structure to by the later structure that was adopted, there's a variation from 25% range spread at the lower grades to a 50% range spread in the higher pay grades. What this means is that someone who's hired into a lower grade would see their pay increase only 25% as they, years and years and years and years here at the organization, excluding COLA changes, because that also shifts the range. But someone at a higher pay grade could see their pay increase as much as 50% over time. Now, compensation is sometimes described as being more an art than a science. But that said, in my opinion, combining both a broadband and a tenure-based structure is a poor structural decision, because I think you should use one or the other. My recommendation has always been to use a narrow tenure structure based on market pay at lower pay grades, but use a broader range at the higher grades that allows you to best fit a candidate into the structure in accordance with both their experience and the market pay for that job. Because market pay should always be the driver for the job entry. When at a higher, we're talking now leadership jobs. When you're hiring someone into a leadership position, you want to base where you bring them in at the market pay. And then as you give them pay increases, it should be based on their performance. Because the most important element of how much you should be paid when you're serving in a leadership position in any organization is how well you are performing in that job. Tenure alone, how many years you've been in the organization, should be only a passing consideration at the higher grades. Our structure is designed so that it makes no difference whether you're in your leadership position. It makes no difference how well you are performing. You're going to be getting paid these pay increases, and you have that broad range so that the difference between what you get hired at and what you have after 15 years or 20 years is as much as 50% change. So that's all I have to say about all that. That's what I wanted to share, and that's the information we're going to provide to the public. Any questions?
Can you, Melanie, it's Jill. Can you
Yeah.
tell me how the comps got approved? I've like never seen Spokane in anything I've ever done anywhere. So how
The
did
the
Gallagher?
comps, yeah, Gallagher made those decisions, and I would assume, but Jill, it's just an assumption, that the approval of those comps would have been done by the HR director and the executive director.
So just for future, I think that the comps used for any kind of salary study or anything should be approved by the board. The foundation used going forward should be approved by the board. Because I don't think the board would have agreed to those comps, first of all. We wouldn't use it for our other labor contracts. It's just, those aren't comparable agencies. Just as an observation, the first step in the process was a little off the track.
So I'm curious. about what
Understood.
you thought of it.
I mean, I would think you'd pick the size of your agency and the size of your community. You'd pick one larger agency, probably like that would be like, I think, you could pick Whatcom, Skagit, or Snohomish. You could pick one of those systems. I understand why we would pick a school district because they're bus drivers in our region. I understand, that the city of Oak Harbor isn't a transit agency and doesn't offer transit services. So I'm not sure that I would pick that as a comp. I mean, I'm not just talking about bus drivers, but I'm talking about workers doing the same kind of work. For sure, Spokane Transit, right? That's the Seattle of the East Side. Why would we go to the East Side and pick a huge city to do a comp study on? We're none of those things, right? So, I think Yakima is a little questionable. I would just pick a big one and some ones that are more comparable to our size and scale. And I think that's how we set a lot of our other wages. So it's odd that we wouldn't use the same scoping for administrative wages as we'd use for like our union comp wages.
I guess- Yeah, just to respond to that, I guess, I am like Everett Transit, Skagit, Kitsap. Those agencies, potentially are compete with us for the same employees. So it seems to me those would be, I agree with you, perhaps Spokane is the right one. City of Oak Harbor, South Whitney School District. I know that there are.
I didn't call any of the things you just set out. I called out Yakima and Spokane. The city of Oak Harbor doesn't operate buses to my knowledge. So I'm like, well, that's not a comparable type of, I understand that they have an HR director and this organization has an HR director, but it should have been based on, I mean, again, I'm not an expert at this, but like we do this I'm on this regional behavioral health board. And we did this very same thing. And they came back with, well, here's what doctors' salaries are in King County. We said, well, we're not doctors and we're not using King County as our comp, even though our region goes to the border of Snohomish, right? That's not a size scale comp for us to use in determining these wages. So I just think in general, the first conversation that the board should have in all of these future studies is, do we have agreement on the organizations and comps we're looking at?
Fair enough, yeah. Other questions?
I guess I want to point out that most people who work at Island County, excuse me, wrong hat. Most people who work at Island Transit did well out of this wage study. I just saw a note popped up saying we should do another wage study, but if you're a worker at Island Transit, most people who work at Island Transit did well out of this wage study.
It's important point out, we're talking about non-represented too.
Yes, non-represented, excuse me. You're absolutely right, Craig, and we should emphasize that. This did not include our bus drivers or our dispatch people, did not include those individuals. Most non-represented people, though. And when I say wage study, I mean the salary structures that were adopted as a result of the market study, because the market study indicated that Island Transit was already paying comparable wages. But the salary structures that was adopted, most people did pretty well out of that salary structure.
So based on that market study, what, do you know what justification was used to change the salary structure October to December? And why the addition of that 12th pay grade?
That is the conversation that we're in that would lead to an executive session, Eric.
All right, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Other questions before we move on? Thank you, Commissioner Bacon, for such a detailed presentation. This, I know, has occupied a lot of your time and energy, and I'm appreciative.
Yeah, I just hope that people, that a lot this, having this data in front of them will help. I'm sure it will create some new questions, but I hope that it will answer a lot of questions that people who work for the organization or in the public have.
All right. So I think we are now moving on to business item number 5. This is the selection of executive services firm. Commissioner Bacon and Councilman Bright and I met, and we have a recommendation to the board. Turn it over to Commissioner Bacon.
Yeah, thank you. So we received applications from 4 different vendors, proposals from 4 different proposals. One was Xander Mercy LLC, one was Ford Webb Associates, one was Taylor Fuere, and the 4th one was GMP Consultants. And after looking at what they wanted to charge and what they how soon they thought they could have somebody, their firm's availability and so on, we had a variety of things we evaluated on. We are recommending that the board give the recruitment to GMP. And if you have any questions, GMP, the principal at GMP is Greg Prothman, who many of us have worked with in the past. Greg Prothman, when he was with a different firm, not GMP, managed the last recruitment for this agency, so has a familiarity with this agency.
Can you just speak to some of the details of what's in it, such as the time frame, dollar amount?
So
Specificity would be helpful.
Sure, I can do that. So there are some factors in the cost that will change depending on how many folks apply and so on. But it looks like it would cost us around $25,000 to $30,000 probably to do this search. They had asked for 12 weeks, but I had communication with them yesterday to see if we, we work very carefully with you, can we get this done by earlier than that? And they indicated they could get it done. If they could start right away, they could get it done by mid to late September. Certainly they have, I can send you if you guys want. Certainly we should. I apologize that this didn't happen, but the close of this RFP process was Wednesday. We just met to talk about it yesterday afternoon. We're kind of pushing, but certainly I can send you this executive director recruitment proposal if you'd like. Or Jeannie, you're there. Do you have access to the executive? Do you have access to this?
I do.
Can you make
Yes, I do.
copies and get them to the board members and email one to Janet St. Clair, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Bright, do you want to add anything?
Only that I think that we did a pretty comprehensive look across the RFP submissions. I think that there was varying ranges of cost, high end being in the upper 60s, all the way down to what Commissioner Bacon shared, which is between $25,000 and $30,000 range. I think in looking at scope of services and some, variability in cost, where it looked like a couple of one of the submissions in particular didn't really give hard numbers. They gave a lot of variables that I personally was uncomfortable with. I would like to have a high and a low range, and somewhere in the middle is hoping where we land at, but that wasn't provided to us. I think that the fact that this entity has knowledge of us will help us speed to market in this process, because we aren't going to have to do a ton of due diligence to help them to understand who we are and what our motivation is. And I also think that their flexibility and agility around the timeline was a positive. There was one RFP that was submitted that said that they could get it done in a month, which I just had to take a step back from that because I don't think it's possible. So that one, just right off the bat, I just had, and the cost was prohibitive for us. So I do think that we looked across the range of submissions and just all of the scope of services. This particular one that we're recommending does have an out clause for us. So that's one of the things that I always look at: how tied to it are we, and for how long if we're unsatisfied. So that was another positive in this one.
Are we making a decision on this today? Because I know it's a somewhat of a time sensitive issue. And Jenny, thank you for that information.
Sure.
We do know, I'm sorry, I'm a little hoarse today. We do know Prothman and GMP, and certainly I feel good about this selection. I was mostly just looking for a more robust description of the proposals and comparison. So thank you.
Sure.
Do we need a decision today?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
If we're going to go forward, we need to. We certainly can't wait 3 weeks.
I kind of ask a question.
Yeah, please.
So I'm not as uncomfortable with the selection of the search firm. One, because I'm familiar, and two, because we allowed these board members to make the recommendations. So I'm trusting that their knowledge and skill set. I do want to have a quick conversation though, make sure I understand the process. So this is hiring the search firm. Is the search firm then going to come back and meet with the board about our goals and values? Because one thing I'm a little uncomfortable with was kind of the concept of, he knows us, he hired the last person, he knows our goals and can get someone to fit that. And just to be very transparent, I don't know that I share all the past goals. I'm a little bit and have been concerned, which is why, according to some members, I bullied my way onto this board, not members you, members past. So because I feel like we've lost our focus from drivers and maintenance and riders and routes and started fiefdom building. And I'm uncomfortable with that kind of culture. But we as a board have not had a culture conversation about who do we actually want to be as an organization? Are we still headed in the right direction? I want to make sure that that conversation happens. And by selecting this firm, we aren't locked into our vision today, like right now, because I don't feel like this board, maybe I missed a meeting because I do miss meetings. I don't feel like there's been a what are we looking for vision discussion, and what kind of organization do we want to be? And where in the process does that happen? Because if it happens before you select the search firm, I'm going to have to vote no. If it happens afterwards, then I can be more comfortable.
I think that, go ahead.
Oh, well, what I was going to recommend, Jill, is that perhaps it could be you and Eric and Janet that meet with GMP and talk about this. Because Craig and Jenny and I, maybe Craig and Jenny want to be part of that. Craig and Jenny and I, we did meet with GMP, but we went over all of these RFP proposals. maybe, I don't disagree with you. We've never had that conversation. I don't think we can wait for another 3 weeks to our next scheduled board meeting to have it. But I think it is important that our search reflect who we are and what our expectations are. I would be comfortable with any other 3 members of this board being, identifying what we want them to search for. I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and
Um,
Joe, my comment about them knowing us and having a history was not to replace any upfront conversations that we would have about our mission and vision. It was really that they had foundational knowledge of an
Yeah.
organization of our size, of the history of where we've been, so that we could go forward and not have significant ramp up time, if you will. So I absolutely agree with you. It's foundational only.
So
There
I
will
will-
also need to be board buy-in on the job description, so that discussion will be part of that formulating that job description, which may or may not be the same as it was the last time we went through this process. That's part of their schedule is developing that, and that's an important part of the process.
So I would like to actually thank Commissioner Johnson. I think that's an extremely important observation. And what I'd like to propose is this, that we as a board come together next Friday in a special meeting to have exactly that conversation. It's important that we select the firm now so that we can get that process going. But I think that it's important also that we as a board have a conversation you're suggesting. So I hope you'll vote in favor of selecting this agency. And I think we should definitely come together and discuss where we want to go. And that will probably, maybe some of the candidates will be interested in hearing that as well.
I mean, I'm comfortable-ish. I know the company, I think based on what our vision is, if something changes in who we. So let's say that our highest value was a more inclusive approach to hiring, right? The company we're recommending has a fairly traditional recruitment pool. And I'm not placing any judgment on that. It's just a fact because we've worked with him before and tried to explain we want more inclusive hiring practices. And his network is not particularly that, although he works hard at it. But so again, I'm comfortable, sort of. I guess I'm not as comfortable as I say I am. I want to make sure that when we say these are our values, that the firm we hire has a network within that value set, right? I don't anticipate that his skill set would be off from what we're going to want, but it does seem a little bit out of sequence to hire someone before you know if they're capable of delivering you the type of applicant that you may want. Did I say that in a way that didn't offend anybody? Because I'm not super strong in all of these types of conversations, but I do know that, again, I can speak from the county. We're look, we keep hiring the same types of individuals and they are well qualified and they're doing a good job, right? But our reach is not non-traditional. It's not super creative. We end up with very similar outcomes all the time. And we like that because we're comfortable there, but it doesn't always lead to growth. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say. I've said it. I'm fine with taking the vote. It's just, I want to make sure that this person can get us what we want when we get done visioning.
So does the board members have availability for next Friday, a special board meeting? It does not look like Commissioner St. Clair does.
I'm checking. Oh, I can't get messaging.
A lot of calendar checking happening at the moment.
I honestly don't need to check Jenny and Melanie's work. I think they've done good screening and I don't feel a need to meet and review these. I just wanted to get more information in this place. But yeah, I'm booked up next Friday. I am willing to make a motion and go forward with the recommendation if the board is ready.
I'll tell you, Craig, I'm not as comfortable because I don't know this company. I've not seen the RFP. I've not seen their scope of work. Anything that goes into this. So I absolutely trust, the evaluation process that was done. But I'm uncomfortable approving something without having any information whatsoever about it. So if this is the desire of the board to move forward with this, I will support it in this particular instance, but I can't do this moving forward. I mean, I have to see the information. I have to have time to review it, because I don't want to get into the practice of approving contracts or doing anything like that without having ample time to do my due diligence. It'd just be absolutely irresponsible.
100%. Yeah, thank you, Eric. I actually was uncomfortable with how little of some of the materials I had coming into this meeting, and really needing us to make sure we're fully prepared with everything that comes before us in advance of the meeting. So I agree with that. If it's the board's will to wait and give everyone a chance to review the process, I do have a different level of comfort because of my familiarity. I'm fine either way. But I do think we need to take a little bit more effort to make sure that all board members have everything in advance.
I can agree to hire the firm. I do want to do the visioning before we do the job description and we start even the recruitment process. I think that that's important. And I appreciate, Melanie's suggestion that those of us who weren't involved in the RFP process be involved in the visioning process. But I believe that belongs to the entire board, because I know I can be very dominant and get my way on things, because I just wear people down. But that doesn't mean that my way's right? And it doesn't mean it's the shared vision of the group. So I think everybody needs to be in that. I have more self-awareness than people give me credit for.
So Commissioner Bacon, are you available next Friday, and Councilmember Bright?
I'm trying to pull up my calendar and it's not cooperating. I believe that I'm available. I'll make myself available.
What time are you? Yeah,
Fine.
Greg, what time are you proposing?
I imagine we're talking 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. again.
I am
Eric,
not
you-
available, and I have an unmovable appointment at that time. So
So Jenny's out.
if you need to meet without me, I understand, but I'm available anytime after 11 on that Friday.
Jenny's out, Janet's out, Eric can't start till 9, so we're, so 9:30, sorry. So, I mean,
So can we check? We've done special board meetings in the Friday afternoon. Is that possible?
I'm open Friday afternoon.
you're killing my social life here, but yeah.
I'm only available up till 3 o'clock. I have a commitment at 3 o'clock on Fridays.
Could you repeat that?
I am only available up till 3 o'clock. I cannot go past 3 p.m. I have
Okay,
a meeting that's scheduled.
can we start at, can we start at 1:30?
To 3?
1:30 to 3, 90 minutes?
Are we doing a single topic? Do we need 90 minutes for a single topic?
I don't know how long the visioning is going to take. We can
Oh, are we
certainly.
doing visioning? I thought we were doing
Yeah.
review of the contract for GMP.
Can
No.
I, Jenny, did you say that you're available
Mhm.
after 11?
I am available after 11.
After 11? Can I ask us to consider doing it, starting at noon, having lunch brought in? And the only reason is because I actually have a dentist appointment at 3 o'clock on next Friday. Down in
So
Freeland.
Okay, so that sounds like a winner. Lunch, we get lunch.
Noon to 2.
Noon to
All right.
2.
What'd you say down there?
Noon to 2.
Noon to 2, thank you. All right. So are we going to then potentially vote on that proposal after our visioning, or are we gonna vote now? What's the word?
My suggestion would be that if people feel comfortable with voting on our vendor, that we do that now, and let me see if he would be available if you select him to attend this or any part of this.
I like that idea, Commissioner. I think
Great
that
idea.
a great
Well,
idea.
it does, I favor that as well. It does allow us to get the engagement going. And, really thoughtful conversation here. I appreciate it. All right, so is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the procurement or the contract with GMP for executive search. Is that the right language?
Yeah.
In the map or no?
I'll
Is there a
second.
Councilmember Wright seconds. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Craig, I guess the only ask that I would have is if there are any materials, job description language, past vision, mission statements that we might have access to prior to this meeting, I think it would give us some
Yeah.
insight on where we go from here.
Sure, the clerk of the board does have the information from the past search. And a lot of that, we'll make that information available.
Thank you.
Does the motion need a dollar amount in it?
We're approving the proposal, so there's a dollar amount in the.
Uh,
Can you confirm that? Commissioner
We
Bacon?
could say not to exceed $30,000 without further authorization.
Okay,
I would be willing to amend my motion to include the language referenced by Matt.
thank you. Any other questions, discussion?
The second amending.
We have a second from.
Is she okay with the
Second.
amendment?
Yeah, second as
Okay.
amended.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, passes. Okay, business item number 6. Update on the executive director transition. It feels like we just dealt with a little bit of that a minute ago.
So what we're gonna try to do, everybody, is to try to get a new person in here and Craig out of here by mid-September is our goal, right, Craig? Now,
That's
what
definitely-
we haven't addressed is human resources administrator position. So my recommendation that I mentioned at an earlier board meeting was that we wait to fill the position until we have an executive director who could be part of that decision making. But I'm totally up to, it's totally up to this board how they want to do that. What I was thinking is that we would get applications through the month of August or September, and then we'd have the new person. One of the first things they would do is be part of the interviews for that position. But whatever you guys feel. I have no intention to stay here a day longer than, it's been lovely, but I have no intention to stay here a day longer than is necessary for the security of the organization.
This is Craig's, what item number 6 with your position, and then what Melanie's adding to that business item was what I wanted to talk about in business item number 8. Was
Okay.
what are our expectations? What's our time frame? I do want to add a little bit about pacing and number of decisions get made to only the most critical decisions so that we can hand to the new director, you know, some of the work that needs to be ongoing. But I've been frankly concerned about, I've been highly appreciative, let's start there, with the level of commitment that Chair Sear has made and Commissioner Bacon has made to our organization during this transition. It's been huge. I've also been highly aware of the impact of that with 2 people who have full-time jobs and what that means for them and how can we as a board support that and also, you know, have a conversation so we all have the same expectations of what's happening in this interim period, how to best support you in these transitions, and what we all expect during this time. So that was business item number 8. If we want to, and I'm kind of, my Robert's Rules of Order mind is now exploding if we want to combine what I wanted to bring up with business item number 6. I've made my own brain explode.
Just move on from 6 and we'll deal with it in 8. And that way we don't have to amend or do anything different.
Okay,
That's what I would do.
thank you for unexploding my brain. I'll put it back in my ears.
All right, anything else here? Okay. So we're done with business item number 6. We now move on to business item number 7, update on the National Consulting Project. So we have quite a bit of news here. First piece of news is that National Consulting has completed the web survey. They received 91 responses. Actually, it could be 92, but I think it's 91. This is the web survey where basically numerical data, evaluating the health of the organization, communication, and this web survey was designed to allow NASH to tailor their personal interviews and formulate questions. And a summary of that raw data is coming and will be going out to the board as soon as I receive it. I think that will be next week. So that's good news. The next piece of news is that phone interviews have begun, and we have had 26 interviews that have been conducted so far. Interviews are happening today, and these are phone interviews. And we have 16 interviews scheduled for next week. So we'll approaching around 40, maybe we'll get another 10, 50 interviews. And the feedback from employees has been that it has been useful, and they appreciate the interviewers' questions, and they thought it was useful. That's been the universal feedback. So if we need to schedule more interviews past next week, we will do so. But given the number of the lower numbers scheduled for next week, that next week may be it. So if you are an employee listening to me speak right now and you've not scheduled an interview and you want to, now would be the time. And I want to emphasize that these are voluntary, they're not required. So please know that as well.
And they're confidential and.
And they are.
And they're confidential.
Confidential. I want to emphasize that they are confidential. NASH Consulting will not attach your name to any information that you provide. They are going to be assembling this information and presenting it to the board with recommendations about how the executive director and HR manager can move forward. This will inform the new executive director of the agency. They're coming in. This is really critical information. So again, if you're an employee and you want the new executive director to know your opinion and how the agency can improve, please schedule an interview. Are there any other questions about NASH? All right. Now we move to the acting executive director's report.
No, we're on item number 8.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Oh, yeah. I think my note here too small. So this is item number 8. Is there anything else? This is the scope of the interim leadership. Commissioner St. Clair.
Oh, let me unmute. So thank you. I have been somewhat anxious about the pace and number of things coming to us, and have talked a little bit to Craig about that. I've perceived others feeling some of the same. So just wanted to take a moment for us to have a conversation about this interim time. And I may be alone in my anxiety. That's totally possible, or what folks' expectations are during this time of interim while we move this organization forward. So I don't have anything more to say. I just more wanted to suss it out with the board.
Well,
Yes.
so what are your thoughts about the HR position being about the new executive director being part of the decision making for the HR director? That's reason that I offered that, but I think we need to decide that. how much of a hurry are we to have to fill the HR role?
Well, good question. I just first wanted to sort of see where folks are on, and I may be alone in that on my initial question, which is about expectations and are we all in the same place on where we are in this interim time? So I just wanted to hear from board members.
Please.
I don't know that I am a talker and I stir it up and I sit back. I don't know that I don't know, I can see the wisdom in having the executive director hire the HR director. I also have similar concerns as Commissioner St. Clair's sharing about the pacing of big decisions that we're making. Like, to me, interim is like a yellow light at a stop sign, right? We basically, the organization isn't on red, but we're not on green. And that really our decisions need to be status quo kind of decisions and not change-based decisions and not new vision decisions. And that we're really just keeping the trains on the track. I like multiple analogies there. So I share a little concern about, you know, the intensity of some of the decisions. The route changes are hard to understand. One, I'm new, so I'll take ownership of that. We're not getting a lot of data and rationale in the reasoning that things are being presented to us, right? In fairness, and I believe this is a leadership training issue, so I'm not trying to be critical. But we're getting a lot of trust me decisions without data points, without documentation, without, and I would like to see us use this interim time period to really just be basic operations, not make sweeping changes, keep a list of things that we'd like the new executive director to look at. But I guess when I thought we were doing interim, I didn't think we were doing anything other than lending a signature to the things that had to happen. I didn't have this expectation that we were going to have operational involvement to the degree that it appears you're having to have and Melanie's having to have.
So could I reply to that?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. You're the chair.
So I did not expect to come in as an acting, and by the way, it's acting, not interim.
Okay.
Acting executive director and have to make the changes that we've made in the service. I did not, and the board was not aware of how close the agency was running to the bone. In fact, the bones were breaking, and we had to act to reduce the service that, to reduce the unused services or the services that were consuming way too many resources. And so, when I became aware in conversations with the operations director and other staff members in different settings, it became really clear that we were almost out of gas as an agency when it came to staffing and covering the routes. Councilmember Bright and I are signed up for the cancellations that come out, and I encourage every board member to sign up for those. So we were seeing the number one route canceled. I mean, that is a poor service. I'm talking about on Whitby. We have a number one on Mano, I believe, as well. But I'm speaking about Whitby. We had to act as a board. So it's been intense. And the reason it's intense is that we do not have enough drivers. I have an executive report where I'm going to be making some comments about how I hope to increase our quality of candidates and the number of candidates. I just remind the board, we're 17 drivers down. We had to take action to arrest that problem. So, yeah, Councilmember Bright, did you want to make any comments about that?
Yeah, I struggle with this because I have such deep gratitude for Commissioner Bacon and Councilperson Seer for the work that you've done above and beyond. Uh, Commissioner Johnson, I mean, I share your original perspective on what they would be doing, which was kind of signature administrative, just kind of keep the boat afloat. And unfortunately, I think that there were just too many things left unchecked that by the time we got a new executive director in here, that there would just, we couldn't stay stagnant. So I share Commissioner St. Clair's concern about the amount of time that the two of you are spending dedicated to both of these. What do you call it, Craig? Acting, not
Acting.
interim, acting. Thank you. I want to say the right term. And I'm hoping, having gone through this RFP process and looking at this agency that's going to help us, you know, select somebody, that this will be slowly winding down, and that somewhere in the next 6 weeks or so, there will be some sort of ebb in how much they're having to dedicate to this. But I guess I would ask Commissioner Bacon and Councilperson Seer, like, do you see that there's going to stop being this huge influx in time and decisions? And I mean, or do you think it's going to be constant until we get a new person in?
For me, there are about 5 major human resources issues I need to deal with. And we'll talk about some of them in executive session. Once those issues are dealt with, it'll be a lot easier. But I don't feel I would be responsible if I didn't deal with them.
I think that's fair.
Thank you.
I want to comment that I have appreciated the support of the direct reports to the executive director, and other staff members who have shared with me organizational challenges that could easily be addressed. Some of these will be executive report. I 100% agree with Commissioner Bacon that our largest challenges looking out for the next 6 to 8 weeks are in HR. On the executive director side, I can see the amount of work that I'm going to have to do will slowly decrease. But there are emerging things that I have to address. And again, I appreciate the support of staff and I rely on their advice a lot.
Eric, do you have thoughts?
You know, like Jill's analogies, I think the train was well off the tracks, so it's gonna take some work to get it back on the tracks, so then we can get moving forward. So, initially I was a little uncomfortable with some of the changes that we were making, because it did seem to be kind of out of scope of what an acting director would do, but I understand the necessity of it, and so provided that you guys are comfortable in remaining in that position until we can hire full-time, and I'm comfortable in having you there. I think the changes that have been made are necessary changes. I'm good moving forward. We're going right now.
Thank you, Eric. I raised this issue because I wanted to make sure that we as a board were having sort of a clear and shared understanding, and not because I don't truly appreciate the work of our two acting. My request, and some of this comes from what Eric also says, is that going forward, our packets are complete when they come to us, so that as we make, because these are, Craig, thank you for that analogy, these are big decisions. And so that we can have a complete packet that will help me feel perhaps less anxious just to own my own stuff here. This is an organization that is deeply important to all of us. And so deeply important to all of us. So I appreciate your service And I just wanted to take a moment to have a board conversation. And that's not hard, and that was hard to do unless it moved into sort of a serial kind of meeting, and I didn't want to do that. So thank you for the time and the respect that we had to be able to talk about this. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. All right.
Craig,
So, yes.
Craig, I'm sorry. Before we move on, so have we landed on the fact that we're going to wait to hire an HR director until after the executive director is hired? Is that what we've decided? Yes.
So
Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear.
Yeah, I actually recommend that. I don't think that I should be hiring and signing off on the next HR. I agree with. Sure. So we agree with that approach. Can I see a thumbs up or thumbs down?
As long as Commissioner Bacon understands that at any moment she's like, look, I can't keep up. But I mean, it's fair that she's able to say that this is beyond what I really am able to commit to, right? Like she's making a big sacrifice personally and professionally to try to stabilize this organization. I mean, we saw her get criticized for doing it in the newspaper, right? Like that was really unfair given the scope of what we're asking her to do. So I just want to be clear for everyone that if she says she's out, she's out. I feel like she doesn't get peer pressured into it, do it, and then we take advantage of her because she's got the skills to her own personal detriment. And she needs to say it when it's happening. Melanie.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah.
This
Thank you
was
for
a
saying
hard
that.
week because I think I may have COVID too. And so this was maybe I'm going to take a test, but I'm sick. This one was a hard week because we took time off last week. So I wasn't caught up. So yeah, thank you. Right now I'm okay. I mean, as far as doing the work. Thank you.
And-
Same for you, Craig.
And we'll have, what's that?
Same goes for you, that you can raise your hand and say,
I understand that.
okay,
Well, you heard me in the last board meeting. I said, I can't do this. Into October, there's no way. So, if we get to a point where we have made the selection on the director, I'll be able to evaluate where we are. And plus, as Commissioner Bacon said, we have an executive session where some more information will be shared about the challenges to the agency. And I also just, I have to express two things. One is, you're absolutely right, the board is right. We actually did not understand what we were going to be tasked to deal with. And and everybody at Island Transit should have great appreciation for what Commissioner Bacon has been taking on. Great appreciation.
Yep.
All right, so now, I think we're done with that. So now we have an executive director's report, which I hope to get through in 5 minutes or less. There's very significant information here. I'll start with extraordinarily good news, and that is that Island Transit received a $15 million FTA grant for hydrogen buses and hydrogen fueling infrastructure. There were 6 organizations in Washington State that received grants. Island Transit received the most money of any of the other organizations. King County Metro received $6 million. So the opportunity was identified by Island Transit staff, clerk of the board, Meg Hettner, led the efforts. Tom Igley contributed significantly, as well as others. And in 8 weeks, we received $15 million, 8 to 10 weeks. So there's significant work to be done. Hydrogen buses are a great thing. However, making sure we have access to the fuel, meaning hydrogen, is very important. So
So this is what I was, that's exciting, $15 million sounds exciting, but this is kind of what I was talking about in terms of my anxiety about big decisions or gear shifting. The last conversation we had about hydrogen was we didn't have a way to get it here. We'd have to haul it and we'd have to store it and we'd have to, so, I mean, I guess this is good and maybe we'll talk about it at some other point, but I don't know what the timeline is. Did we vote to accept this money? I mean, I understand that we applied for it probably previously. I understand that people like the concept of like less carbon impact buses, but how are we getting this hydrogen here? Over our single bridge or over our ferry? We're just gonna store it in tanks? What does infrastructure mean? Are we putting in pipes? So this is where, to just speak to Janet's anxiety, this is where I start to get it, because to me, this is a vision shift, not a yellow light operational thing. And so I know you have a passion for this. I have a little bit different of opinion, and I don't know how we got to the decision of the buses.
This was part of our zero emissions plan that was approved by the board last year, and it had included all the hydrogen. So this is not a new direction. This was part of the board direction from last year.
Right, but the zero emissions plan also included the electric buses that we couldn't charge and didn't go as far as we thought, that we just said no to, that we needed diesel for. So this, now I'm gonna use the tone, I can feel the tone. So this is part of my concern about the organization. A little bit about what some of my thought process was of what's going on and should I get involved, is that it seems like there is a huge green energy focus, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But if the values are not, if the technology is not functional, if the infrastructure is not adequate, if we can't do the things we're trying to do, we don't have drivers, we're canceling routes, this is not necessarily my priority. It was respectfully Todd's. And that's part of how we got to where we're at, is that his love for the concept superseded his operational focus. And so I hear that you're excited, but to me, this is a little bit problematic because again, the last presentation we heard was we don't have a great plan for hydrogen yet. That's why we bought those gas buses. So I mean, that's the last conversation that was had with me was that hydrogen wasn't a great solution either. Sorry, I have teary eyes, not because I'm not upset, because allergies. But do you see where that gets a little bit stressful as a board to be like, we got $15 million under an old leadership structure. The next decision we got from that result was, oh, by the way, these electric buses don't work. We had a negative conversation about hydrogen in that conversation as well. Now we get this grant that says we're going to do the thing that the last conversation this board had at this table was that wasn't an ideal solution. So how did we get excited?
Well, Commissioner St. Clair is correct that we have a document that describes our transition that we're required to do in this state to zero emissions. We know that, and we decided that we would be using battery electrics and hydrogen buses. Hydrogen fueled buses are the solution for that sort of a, I hate to use the phrase, but I'm afraid I'm throwing red meat out there, but a green energy solution. The access to the fuel, no one in Washington State has access to hydrogen fuel unless it is currently trucked up from California. Hold on. There is a major federal funding to fix that problem. And another one of our sister agencies has a hydrolyzer that is coming online in 2025, where they will be producing the hydrogen. We will be meeting with them at a conference to understand more about their delivery capacity. And we're hoping to form a partnership with them.
Is the hydrogen being hauled up from California in hydrogen trucks?
I'm going to go to our planning director. He can answer that question.
So for the board's information, this is gonna be a slow moving project that will formulate over years. We are not at this point going past the point of no return. So I do wanna stress that. Right now, we are in the procurement process to bring on board a firm that will supervise the design and construction management process. And what this is we're hiring someone who will be our representative through what will be a very technical process and will help provide us with a lot of technical information about what is possible, what is going on, how does this function? There's a couple hundred hydrogen buses in California and Ohio that are currently functioning. There's agencies that are producing fuel, there's agencies that are shipping it in. And what this oversight firm will enable us to do is sort of learn the lessons that other people have gone through thus far. And how is this doing? And as that internal process for us is going on, the state has applied and been awarded money through the Infrastructure Act, what's called the Hydrogen Hub networks. There was going to be 8 of them formed in the country. One of them is in the Pacific Northwest. That was led by the Washington State Department of Commerce as the lead agency on that application. And what that is it's a way to juice the market for hydrogen. And again, I'm paraphrasing hours of material into about a minute. But it's to help generate producers as well as consumers, both sides of the market, because transit agencies and other users don't want to buy hydrogen vehicles if we have to truck gas up from California. But you can't get private industry to produce hydrogen here in the Northwest if there aren't any consumers. So how do you juice both sides of the supply and demand market at the same time? And that's what the Hydrogen Hub initiative is going to do. That will also take years. So this is not a quick process.
So
Okay.
this is a way longer discussion. It's beyond the scope of this meeting. And if we're going to have our executive session, I didn't ask what, if there's any, hard stops, Commissioner St. Clair, when do you have to leave? You're muted.
It's a good thing some days. I do not have a hard stop at 11
Okay.
today.
All right, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bright.
Actually,
You're-
Tom's had his hand up for quite some time.
I know that, but I want to go to you first and then I'll go to Tom.
No, I mean, I share Jill's concern, and I know that we're gonna have a longer discussion about this. I guess I have just a quick question, like, what is the duration for usage of this money? Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? Do you know what the parameters of usage for the funds are? And do we have to have a utilization strategy in place before we accept the money? So those are just some things that I'd be interested in knowing. I don't want to take possession of money that we know that we're not able to
Right.
have a strategy to use. And hauling stuff in from California, we all agreed that was not a direction that hauling hydrogen in from California was not a direction we wanted to go. It defeats the entire purpose of lowering our carbon footprint.
Right. Answer to those questions will be forthcoming. Good questions
Okay.
too. Tom, you got 60 seconds.
Thanks. So in regards to these questions, I am more than happy to sit down with any of the board members. I know we do have a couple of new members, and I can give an in-depth, have an in-depth discussion regarding this. We've got 2 different concepts. The last conversation that I spoke about is a separate concept and separate issue than what this award money is for. This is for fixed route, full-size buses. The other conversation we had was related more to a backup supply of hydrogen, which is the gas. We're going for all liquid, and this is something. This is a board directed activity from us from a year ago, like they mentioned. So I can give you an in-depth explanation of what is going on if you would like.
Thank you.
Craig, is there a matching component to this grant?
No.
And then can we get a copy of that zero emission mandate? Whatever, because we're new, so if we get a copy of what that looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, because I've heard it referenced several times, but I've not actually seen it, so.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to quickly move on here to, and thank you for all the questions. I honestly, thank you. So, Island Transit is purchasing some replacement transit scheduling software from a company called Ecolane. And this software is going to provide us with a lot more capability in the scheduling of our buses. And significantly, this purchase will save us $170,000 per year in license fees. In addition, we're looking to purchase what is called run cutting software that will automate a very painful several-month process that is done by hand, and it'll whittle this down to a couple of weeks. And Brad, I know you've been partnering with Sean on this, so I'm giving you 60 seconds to make any comments you want to make on this.
Yes, our current route match dispatching software, we're having a number of customer issues with it as far as we're making complaints, we're not getting responses. There are times when things don't work, don't function the way they're supposed to. Their app, we walked away from that because it was just so problematic and it's never getting fixed. So it was installed about 10 years ago. It has gone through its useful life and it's time to cycle that out. The run cutting software, one of the additional functions that will do is it's going to simplify our dispatch operations because right now, if a driver calls in or a dispatcher calls in, there's like 3 different or 4 different locations where it has to be written down so that different people will see it, which leads to a lot of error. In the last minute of, oh gosh, I didn't know the 24B wasn't scheduled for this afternoon. Let's start trying to fill out that hole. And what this will do is it gives everyone access to the same database. And the instant a driver schedules themselves out and a supervisor approves that, they're assigned shifts that would be affected or dropped down into unassigned. And everybody in dispatch and on the operation side can see that and know what needs to be covered. So it's a couple of exciting pieces of software that's really are going to do this. And my last note is on our new CAD AVL software, it will also enable some very reliable projection of real-time information, which is going to enable us to go after a grant this fall through state DOT, where we'll be able to, if we're successful, we'll be able to put out large screens where the public will just be able to see it, like Harbor Station and Clinton Ferry Dock, where our buses are moving around. They can see how far their bus is away. They don't have to have a smartphone. They don't have to download an app. The information will just be there and there will be no barriers between them and the information. So it's exciting stuff.
Thanks very much. Staff has finished the first month of 100% online forms for rideshare. This includes all forms for ride applications, to the monthly tracking forms, even payment processing. And the important thing is this has sped up the processing of monthly reports and cut out almost a week of staff time from the process. I got to call out outreach. It's been mentioned before in this meeting, but there's been outreach at the Clinton Ferry Dock in the afternoons to talk to the public about the service cuts. They've attended 13 public events, including 3 pop-up events for driver recruitment, 3 public meetings to gather feedback on the September service changes. In 2023, the board authorized sign-on bonuses of up to $5,000 to encourage recruitment of drivers. The initial value of the sign-on bonus was set by the executive director at the time at $2,000. Staff tells me that this sign-on bonus is the lowest in the region, with other agencies in the $4,000 to $6,000 range. As you heard from our operations director, Sean Harris, in previous board meetings, Island Transit is short-staffed by 17 drivers, meaning our $2,000 bonus has not had the desired effect. And I've been advised by staff that an increase is appropriate and would absolutely make a difference. So I directed staff to explore increasing the sign-on bonus to $5,000. And that's the maximum within the authority that I have given by the board in May. We have taken other steps to make the employee experience better in terms of delivering, making job functions easier. And the biggest example of this that I can think of is the introduction of very wide curved screens in the dispatch area. I encourage every board member to go, it's actually physically here, to walk back to the dispatch area and see what I'm talking about. It's eliminated a huge amount of overlap on the screens. The dispatchers are extremely excited about this, and it will be instantly obvious to you why this is a good thing. This past week, I traveled to Representative Larson's office in Everett to meet his staff, including his new liaison to Island Transit, whose name is Mark Martinez. And while there, I learned that Representative Larson will be visiting Whidbey Islands in early August, and will include a stop at Island Transit for a presentation, a tour, and lunch. And then finally, I observed our community outreach team in action at the Pride Parade, as well as the Clinton Ferry Dock. As I mentioned before here, educating around the change in service of the Clinton community. It was very interesting to see the kinds of questions and feedback that we get from the public and what they're concerned about. Particularly not when they're commuting, but when they are at it. And it was, I was proud of the agency. And that is my acting executive director's report. So any questions?
You're doing a good job. Also, I think the employees here are excellent, even though I got organizational and operational criticism. It's a personality thing. But I think your observation about how people interact with the public from this organization is something noteworthy. It's actually very impressive.
Thank you for saying that. All right, finance report.
Good morning, and I'm going to be reporting today on a finance report for the year 2024. We had a finance committee meeting on July 8th and reviewed all this information. Cash sources, our sales tax revenue was up by 31,000, 2.23% versus the May of last year. Contract revenue increases. You can see we almost hit about 600,000 there. Next slide, please. If we look at sales tax actual versus budget, you can see that sales tax was down about $10,000, 0.74% from what we had budgeted. We budgeted a 3% increase. So the other interesting thing you can see from this slide is a green where we are compared to budget. You can see the last 2.68 months, we actually did not meet our budget goal of 3%. Whereas the previous 3 months, we exceeded it. Overall for the year so far, until May, we're at about 38% of our annual goal. We would expect to be about 40.67. So we're about a little over 3.5% less than we expected in our budget in terms of sales tax revenue. Operating grant contract revenue, you can see in the detail here, we have 4 operating grants and we received payments for the service large at those amounts. And then we also have significant miscellaneous revenue in the form of vehicle surplus, a little over $58,000. Investment interest income, you can see most of I'll just say, and that should say May, I apologize, it says April there, but we had an interest of $144,000 approximately, up 25, a little over 25%, or almost 30,000 from last month. And we have $62 million invested currently. ICTIP, this is most interesting, is up 35 basis points or almost 15%. So even though we're seeing the LGIP kind of a steady increase, ICTIP suddenly has surged. And next slide, please. Cash uses, May payroll, 1.2 million in terms of cash. It's up almost $500,000, 60% from last month, or over 2,000, 20% from last year. Now, if we look at it from an accrual basis, what should have been paid in 1 month, you might say, we're only up 0.46 for about $5,000. So even though our cash flow, with timing of payments, primarily for benefits, and is sometimes pushed into another month, when we fit it into the month that it applies to, there's not much change at all. March, non-payroll payments, a little over 350,000. It was down about 13 or 20, almost 25% last month. And it's up 121,000, or about 52% last year. So, I say this each month, the capital expenses vary based on the projects. And, that's not always constant. Next slide, please. Any capital payments, you can see were minimal. Terry's Corner Station, a little over $2,400, facility upgrades, almost 8,800, and Eco Lane tablets, $5,000. So minimal capital payments wasn't made. Next slide, please. Cash reserves, you can see our cash, total cash, it's almost 65 million, 64.7. And our cash increased by almost $700,000. Next slide, please. And graphically, you can see as well, the bar chart continues to proceed north. May, once again, 64.7, up about 700,000. Budget actual, May revenue. It was above budget for Vanderbilt miscellaneous operating grants, sales tax, as I said before. Decrease in terms of the overall year of about 3.5%. So we still need some improvement there. But looking at our target, 41.67% for the first 5 months. We are ahead in revenue in fares, operating grants, and miscellaneous. So overall, you can see, 35%, that you might think to yourself that's a little bit worrisome. But if you look at the next slide, our budget actual expense side, even though our target's 41.67, our total expense is just below 20%. So we're doing fine in terms of cash flow, and our revenues are slightly down compared to budget. Our expenses are lower. So we're healthy and we're doing fine. The expense is below budget for insurance supplies. I'm sorry, is above budget for insurance supplies, communication. And we continue to exceed our monthly budget goal. I can see, I mean, we're all where we would have expected this time of the year. That's the end of my budget report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Any questions?
Yeah, so we're at 100% of our budget for insurance already through May.
Yeah, we prepaid that, so we paid it all January.
Okay. The cash reserves, does that include what's invested?
Cash reserves is the total amount, and we've invested 62 million of that currently with the county.
Okay.
The rest is, you might say, more in a liquid form, where we can use that to just pay our operating expenses and our payroll.
And then, Sling, can you go back to that graph with the investment?
Sure.
It seems to me, and maybe I've been misreading this, like the LGIP seems to be doing consistently better than our current investments, and so why do we stick with our current investment as opposed to that LGIP?
Well, we're currently, we have an unusual arrangement.
That's because the county's locked in, just like Island Transit is, long-term investments. That's why she's laughing. We have the same chart and we're like.
It's my mantra.
Okay.
It's my
You know-
mantra, Eric. I bring it up every month.
I've heard you bring it up, but I don't know that I heard the answer, and so I was just curious as
So
to.
actually, let's let
Yeah.
Paul, because there's some structural things we need to.
Yeah. And this organization is formed, the Island County Treasurer is our treasurer. So we receive more than just investments from Island County. They actually perform a function of internal control on this organization. So our payments, we send a remittance to them every time we have expense, payroll expense or our vouchers. And when we receive our revenues, it really is coming through the county. They're maintaining our bank account. We also signed an agreement to be in their investment pool. And part of that agreement means that we can't ask them to invest in other places, even though they invest part of their ICTIP money in the LGIP. We're not allowed to do it ourselves and direct them to do it for us. So naturally, we would go to the highest rate. But the other thing that can be said is that if you look over a longer stretch of time when interest rates were extremely low, they were sitting at the bottom of this chart, whereas the ICTIP was say at 1.5%. The LGIP might have been 3% or something like that. So the last couple of years, it would have been to our advantage to be in the LGIP. Go back further, it would have been to our disadvantage. So really, it could be, if I was just looking at this chart, I think I would say, probably want to exit the ICTIP and do our own thing. But I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Also, Paul, sorry, just, I want to say one thing. Paul, you've told me that if we were to exit the county, we'd be bringing the entire operation in-house. There would be audit issues. We'd have to staff up at least one FTE at least, I believe, right?
Probably. And the audit issue would be just the reduction of internal controls, right? Because you have, right now, the treasurer serves as an external control. Or if we looked at ourselves as a community organization, maybe function like another internal control body on the transit. Because we're reconciling against their statements that they generate for our organization.
Paul,
Someone else.
this is Janet. Paul, it might be helpful in a future meeting to just bring a 5-year look back, because that visualizes a lot of the data that you talked about. Because we have these same questions when we look at our reports in the county, and Jenny's raised this, but that look back may be helpful to the board, because that tells a different story about our long-term investments.
Yeah, I think that right now, for the last couple of years, the spread has been so great that we've determined that we're, forfeiting between $1 million and $1.8 million every year. And it's disconcerting. But you're right, I could present a wider view on this to really see a bigger picture.
My understanding, and I could be wrong, but I thought every junior taxing district had to opt in to the county's investment pool. So she wanted to put it in place. So that's why I said she. I think you can opt out of the investment pool for future money once your money comes out of it, because it's just, they're locked into long-term bonds. It's just why we can't get out. They were great investments at the time. Now we can't get out. But I thought each entity had the ability to say whether or not they were going to participate or not, because we have some junior taxing districts that are not participating.
I think that's true. You have a choice to opt in.
But to opt out,
Well,
you'd have to let the money that you've got invested ride out till those bonds cash out, I think.
I think I was also told, and I can ask again, I was told that if we pull out that our relationship, we need to change as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's where I'm concerned. So I think we should check, because I feel like that might have been a little heavy-handed negotiation and not an actual fact.
It's a great example of a conversation I hope the board takes up as soon as we have the new director in place, so that we can do a deep dive into this question. We've all wondered about this over time.
Actually, Paul and I had this discussion yesterday, I believe it was. No, actually, it was on Tuesday when it was last year. And I did ask Paul to take a look.
So my last question has to do with the awards and bonuses. And that's something I've just been kind of uncomfortable with since I first heard about it. Can you explain to me how those are distributed? And I'm assuming it's some that the board approved to do, but how are those distributed? What's kind of the guiding principle behind that?
Are you talking about,
It says on the payroll report, we've got awards and bonuses of $6,000.
what page are you looking at?
It's says pay.
Oh, okay, payroll.
Yeah.
Okay, I think those are the driver bonuses to sign on.
Those are driver bonuses.
I can look into that closer, but it's in the ops department.
But there is some kind of a cash bonus or a cash gift type of situation, is there not?
Those were spot bonuses.
Yeah.
Spot bonus.
That was a program that, you know, Todd Morris started, it was a spot bonus award program. And that was awarded by managers when they identified exemplary service. Usually it was an amount between $100 and $300.
And how much is total is allowable for this? I mean, do we have a budget for that?
Yeah, I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'm thinking in the range total for the company was probably between $10,000 and $12,000. Was budgeted. I'd have to do a little more research to just tell you how much was utilized, see 2023.
So it's just at the discretion of the managers and who they give those to.
Each manager was limited, but it was for their allotted amount, it was up to their discretion to use it or not.
Ask for a report on who's gotten over the last year.
For me,
Ask for a report on who's gotten them over the last year.
Jack, can we get a report of who's gotten over the last year? Thank you.
Actually expand that to like 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
If there's no other questions,
Thanks.
thank you very much.
All right, so, finance report, so now we are moving into executive session, review the performance of the public. CW 42.3.1.
We need a time on that for Jeannie.
Yes, let's, Commissioner Bacon, is this 15 or 20 minutes starting out? I can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. We could always do the 15 and expand if we need to.
Okay, 15 minutes.
I'm gonna stop recording and put everybody.
And then Janine, do you want me to email you if there's extended?
Yes, please.
To
All right, our executive session is concluded. We're back in the open session. There being no other business, and I assume no board member comments. I don't see anybody raising their hands, so we are kind of adjourning the meeting and we will reconvene next week.
We ready for us to adjourn?
And thank you very much, everybody.
I don't know that our recording is on.
It is recorded.
It is recording.
Oh, okay. I don't see the little.
Benefit of the
Yeah, we just got that. It's just.
I'm sorry. Okay, so we're back out of executive session. We're into open session now. There being no other business, I don't believe we have any board member comments. We
And
are now
just for the record, just because people were coming in from the waiting room, just announced there was no action taken following the executive session.
Thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate that. All right, for adjourns, reconvene next Friday.
Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna stop recording.
By the
Bye,
way,
y'all.
You notice we have